I swore I'd never return, but what I found at my mother's house left me shaking. My name is Alex. Seattle hadn't seen me in years. I promised myself I'd never step foot in my mother's condo again. And yet, here I was, trapped in the passenger seat of my wife Sarah's hatchback, watching the GPS tick down the last few miles like a countdown to war. And for me, in a way, it was. Sarah gripped the wheel with her usual calm, unshaken like always. Years of working as a doctor had trained her nerves to steel, while mine felt like they were snapping with every highway mile. I hadn't unclenched my fists since we left the hotel. "You holding up?" she asked, eyes glued to the road. "I'm fine," I muttered, though my jaw was sore from grinding my teeth. She smirked. "Fine? You've been chewing on your molars since we merged onto the freeway." I hated that she noticed everything, but that's also why I trusted her more than anyone else. I exhaled slowly. "It's just showing up here doesn't erase the past. My mom turning 70 doesn't magically change who she is." Sarah nodded knowingly. "We're not here for her. We're here for your grandfather. That's the only reason you agreed." She was right. Grandpa Arthur had been my anchor in a childhood otherwise swallowed by chaos. While my mother, Eleanor, chased shady business deals, and my father abandoned me for a new family, it was Arthur who packed my lunches, drove me to school, and made sure I never drowned completely. I couldn't imagine not showing up for him. But Eleanor, the fact that she was hosting this whole spectacle, that's what twisted my stomach into knots. My mother never did anything without a hidden agenda. The GPS chimed, and Sarah slowed the car as we turned down the long driveway. The house rose into view, gleaming like something out of a real estate brochure. Fresh paint, crisp shutters, balloons tied neatly to fence posts. A massive banner stretched across the garage, "Happy 70th, Eleanor." I snorted. Figures. She basically threw herself a parade. Sarah glanced at the lawn, her brow furrowing. "This doesn't look like a birthday. It looks like they're staging the place for a sale." That comment hit me like ice water. She was right. Everything was too polished. The grass was manicured into razor-straight lines. The porch, once so rickety I had to sneak out the back as a teenager, looked brand new. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a showroom. We pulled up near the end of the driveway. Before I could even step out, Eleanor came sweeping down the steps, arms outstretched like a politician greeting her voters, her smile stretched wide enough to crack. "There he is," she sang. "My little boy, Alex. You actually came." I froze with my door half open. Little boy? She hadn't called me that since I was 10, and even then, it was usually followed by some lecture about how I wasn't enough, unlike my sister, Rachel. Sarah came around and opened my door all the way. She gave me a look that said, "Smile and get it over with." So I did. "Hi, Mom," I said flatly. Eleanor wrapped me in a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and cheap wine. "You look great. Doesn't he look great, Sarah?" Sarah shook her hand, firm and short. "Always." Then Rachel appeared. She was in a tight red dress, clipboard in hand, like she was running the Oscars. She kissed the air next to my cheek. "Alex, I'm so glad you could make it. Grandpa will be thrilled." Thrilled? Sure. I wanted to say Grandpa would probably be more thrilled if they stopped treating him like a prop, but I kept my mouth shut. We followed them up the steps and into the house. The moment I walked in, something hit me. The living room was exactly the same layout I remembered, but everything looked replaced. New rug, new furniture, even new family photos on the walls, ones I didn't recognize. It was like they'd remodeled the past to fit a story I wasn't part of. Guests filled the room, most of them distant cousins or people I barely knew. But there were others, men in pressed shirts, no ties, no drinks in hand. They stood in corners watching more than talking. "Friends of Mom's?" I asked Rachel. She smiled too wide. "Business partners? Don't worry about it." That was the second thing that twisted in my gut. My mom's business partners never meant anything good. Then I saw him. Grandpa Arthur was in his favorite armchair by the window, the pale blue shawl draped around his shoulders. He looked smaller than I remembered, paler, like someone had drained the color from his face. "Hey, Grandpa." He looked at me, blinked slowly, then smiled. "Al, you came." His voice was soft, almost sleepy. He squeezed my hand, but his grip was weak. Sarah leaned down. "Good to see you, sir." He looked up at her and said, "Marie?" I froze. Grandpa had never once called her by the wrong name. Sarah smiled politely, but I could feel her hand press into my shoulder like a signal. "Don't react." Rachel swooped in like a hawk. "He's just a little tired. Doctor says it's normal for his age." Then she clapped her hands. "Pictures outside in minutes." She spun away before I could answer. Sarah bent close to my ear. "Something's off." I didn't need convincing anymore. The house felt like it was holding its breath. The decorations, the fake smiles, my mom acting like Mother of the Year. It was all too polished. And Grandpa, the sharpest man I knew, barely able to keep his eyes open. None of it added up. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. Sarah took one, but didn't drink. She just kept scanning the room, her jaw tight. I knew that look. It was the same one I'd seen when she checked a hotel room overseas before we went to sleep. She was in observation mode, cataloging every detail. "Relax," Eleanor said, appearing beside us with 2 glasses of punch. She handed me one. "Enjoy yourself. This is a big day." I forced a smile and sipped. The taste was too sweet. "It's something, all right." Sarah raised her glass but didn't drink. "You've got quite the guest list, ma'am." Eleanor chuckled. "Had to make it special. Not every day I turn 70. Then she patted my shoulder, leaned in close, and whispered just low enough for only me to hear. "I'm glad you're here. You'll see how much things have changed." I didn't answer because the truth was, I already had. Sarah's hand tightened on my shoulder as Eleanor drifted back into the crowd, her smile pasted on for everyone else. I knew that grip, subtle, controlled, but it meant one thing: stay alert. I let go of Grandpa's hand and stood, plastering on a polite grin as another cousin came over to hug me. He smelled like cigar smoke and too much cologne, asking the same questions everyone else did. "How have you been? Still in the military? You must have some stories." I nodded and gave short answers, keeping my eyes on the room instead of him. Sarah had already shifted into her quiet mode, that doctor stillness that looked relaxed to strangers. Wow, but told me she was clocking every exit, every face, every little movement. Rachel floated past with her clipboard, pointing out who needed to be where for the family photo. "Mom, stand in the middle. Alex, maybe next to Grandpa. Yes, perfect." Her voice had that fake sweetness that made me want to grind my teeth. Eleanor raised her glass in the center of the room, calling for attention. 70 years, folks. I wouldn't be here without family. The crowd clapped politely, but I noticed how her eyes slid right over me when she said, "Family." She squeezed Rachel's shoulder like she was the golden child she'd always been. I felt the sting but swallowed it. I'd dealt with worse from her. Sarah leaned down just enough for only me to hear. "They're performing, not celebrating." She wasn't wrong. Every laugh sounded rehearsed. Every smile held too long. Even the food was laid out like it was for a magazine shoot, untouched, perfect platters that nobody dared mess up. I excused myself and walked toward Grandpa again. He was half asleep in the chair, his shawl slipping off one shoulder. I fixed it gently. "You okay, Grandpa?" His eyes fluttered open. "Alex, honey, you came home." I forced a smile. "Of course." He patted my hand weakly. "Don't let them. Don't let them." His voice trailed off and his eyes closed again. A chill ran through me. "Don't let them. What?" Before I could lean closer, Rachel swooped in again, snapping her fingers at some guy to adjust the lighting near the window. She gave me a look like I was hovering too much. "He needs rest, Alex. Why don't you mingle? Mom wants you to meet some of her colleagues." I straightened slowly. Business colleagues at a birthday party? She didn't flinch. Mom's never just celebrating. You should know that by now. She walked off before I could answer, clipboard snapping against her hip. Sarah came over with 2 glasses of water. "He doesn't look right." He's exhausted, I said, even though I didn't believe it. He was sharp as a tack months ago when I called him. This isn't normal. Sarah handed me the glass. Then we pay attention. Keep your ears open. As if on cue, two of the men in dress shirts shifted by the patio doors. They weren't talking to anyone, just standing there, eyes scanning like security. One muttered something into his phone before slipping it back in his pocket. Sarah's eyes flicked that way. Not family, not friends. I followed her gaze. Who are they then? She shrugged. That's the question. Eleanor's booming laugh pulled my eyes back. She was holding court near the fireplace, retelling some story about a big deal in Portland. People chuckled, but I could see the strain in their faces, like they were laughing because they had to. Rachel reappeared at her side, whispering. Something in her ear. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. I leaned toward Sarah. That wasn't about the party. Definitely not, she muttered. Another cousin grabbed me for a picture, and I stood stiffly while Rachel arranged everyone like chess pieces. Grandpa was rolled into the center in his chair, his head tilted slightly forward like he was barely awake. Rachel positioned herself right behind, resting her hands on the back of the chair as if to remind everyone she was in charge. Say cheese, she chirped. The camera flashed. I didn't smile. Afterward, I slipped away into the kitchen for a break. The counters gleamed. Spotless. Too spotless. Not a single dirty, even though people were eating in the next room, it looked staged like a set, not a kitchen in use. Sarah joined me, lowering her voice. You notice the guys outside? Yeah, watching, not partying. And your mom? She's selling something. This whole show feels like a pitch. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You think she invited us for Grandpa's sake? Sarah gave me a look. No, he's the cover. This is about something else. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. I hate being here. She set her glass down. I know, but we need to figure out what's going on. Don't let your guard down. The sound of heels clicked against the tile, and Rachel appeared in the doorway, arching an eyebrow. Hiding already, Alex? Typical. I straightened, my voice sharp. Checking on Grandpa doesn't count as hiding. Oh no, she smirked. You always were dramatic. Then she turned to Sarah, her tone softening. How are you holding up? Must be overwhelming meeting all these people. Sarah smiled politely, but her eyes were flat. I've seen bigger crowds. Rachel's smirk faltered just a second. Then she pivoted smoothly. Well, don't stay in here too long. Mom's about to cut the cake. She disappeared as quickly as she'd come. She doesn't like you asking questions, Sarah muttered. She never did, I said, pushing off the counter. We returned to the living room where the cake waited, candles lit, Eleanor grinning wide at the head of the table. Grandpa was wheeled closer, his eyes half closed. Rachel grabbed the knife and handed it to Eleanor like it was some kind of coronation. As everyone sang, I couldn't take my eyes off Grandpa. His lips moved faintly, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. Sarah touched my arm lightly. "Stay sharp." I did. Eleanor sliced into the cake, handing out pieces with exaggerated cheer. "To family," she shouted. Everyone clapped, but it sounded hollow. I held the plate in my hand untouched. Across the room, one of those men in dress shirts stood with his arms crossed, watching me instead of the cake. I stared back until he finally looked away. Sarah leaned close again, her voice low. "Something's not adding up. Not at all." "No." I pushed the cake around on my plate, pretending to eat while keeping my eyes on the room. Sarah didn't even bother. She set her untouched slice on a side table and drifted toward the sliding glass door like she was just stretching her legs. I knew what she was doing. A few seconds later, she leaned down, whispering, "Cover me for a minute," before slipping outside. I stayed in the circle of relatives making small talk, nodding along to some cousin droning about his new boat, all while watching through the glass. Sarah crouched near the porch, casually tying her shoe, except her hands weren't on the laces. She was tracing a wire that disappeared under the decking. My chest tightened. Why the hell were there wires hidden under the porch? Before I could move, Rachel called out, "Alex, come meet the neighbors." She waved me over to a group by the fireplace. I plastered on a smile and walked over, every step stiff. Rachel introduced me to two men in pressed shirts. They shook my hand, their grips firm, eyes unreadable. Not neighbors, not family. One of them said, "We've heard a lot about you. From the military, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Intelligence," he smiled thinly. "Then you must be good at noticing things." My stomach sank. Eleanor jumped in before I could respond. "He gets that from me," she joked, throwing an arm around my shoulder. "Always sharp." The men chuckled politely, but the taller one never broke eye contact with me. He wanted me to know he knew. Sarah reappeared, slipping back into the crowd like nothing happened. She gave me the faintest nod. "Confirmed." Rachel clapped her hands. "Time for speeches." She pushed Eleanor toward the center again, raising her phone to record. Eleanor cleared her throat, launching into a story about how she built her business from nothing. I tuned her out, focusing on Grandpa slumped in his chair. His head kept dipping forward, his eyes half shut. Nobody else seemed alarmed, but I knew him. This wasn't right. I knelt beside him. "Grandpa, are you okay?" He stirred, his lips dry. "Alex." His voice was faint. "Don't let them." His hand twitched weakly in mine, then went still. "Don't let them what?" I whispered, leaning closer. "Alex," Rachel snapped from across the room, "you're blocking the shot." I froze. Everyone's eyes were on me now, and Eleanor's smile looked just a little too tight. I stood slowly, forcing a laugh. "Sorry, he just wanted some water." Sarah appeared with a glass already in her hand. She'd seen it too. She handed it to me, and I helped Grandpa sip. His hand trembled on the cup. When he drifted back to sleep, Sarah leaned in. "Medicine cabinet's empty." I jerked my head up. "What?" "Check the bathroom. No prescriptions, not even vitamins. Place is scrubbed clean." My heart pounded. Grandpa took heart medication every day for years. It wasn't optional. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Act normal," she whispered. I forced a smile as Rachel's camera swung our way again. I hated how easy it was for her to pretend nothing was wrong. After the speeches ended, people drifted outside for more photos. I took the chance to move through the house with Sarah trailing casually behind me. In the dining room, the table was set too perfectly, like a catalog spread. I lifted a fork. Spotless. Not even a water ring on the wood. "This isn't lived in," I muttered. Sarah scanned the ceiling. Hidden camera above the chandelier, lens barely visible, but it's there. A jolt went through me. Why would they need cameras in their own house? She looked at me flatly. "Not for decoration, Alex." We moved back toward the hallway, keeping our expressions neutral in case anyone was watching. As we passed, I heard one of the business partners murmuring near the back door, "Timing the drop." That was all I caught before he lowered his voice. I grabbed Sarah's arm. Did you hear that? She nodded once. Not party talk. My pulse raced. This was more than a family gathering. Something was being set up here, and Grandpa was in the middle of it. Back in the living room, Eleanor was shaking hands with one of the men. Papers passed quickly between them, slipped into a jacket pocket. No one else seemed to notice. Sarah leaned against the wall, her posture casual, but her eyes sharp. She tapped 2 fingers against her leg twice, our old signal. Danger. I drifted closer to her, forcing a laugh at something a relative said. What now? I whispered. Her lips barely moved. We need proof. Photos if possible. My throat was dry. You think they'll let us walk out of here with that? She didn't answer because Rachel was suddenly beside us, her smile blinding. You two look so serious. Come outside. Mom's about to toast again. Sarah gave her a polite smile. Lead the way. She narrowed her eyes for half a second, then turned back toward the crowd. As we followed, she whispered, Stay calm. Keep playing along. We stepped out onto the patio where the air was cooler. The yard was lit up with strings of lights, kids chasing balloons across the grass, adults sipping drinks. It looked normal from a distance, but my skin prickled. The same men stood at the fence line, scanning, waiting. Eleanor raised her glass. To 70 years of success and to the future. Cheers rose up, but I didn't drink. Neither did Sarah. We stood shoulder to shoulder, silent. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Smile for the camera. I froze, staring at the screen. Sarah glanced down. Who? I showed it to her, her jaw flexed, eyes flicking back to the chandelier where she'd spotted the lens. Act normal, she said again. I lifted my glass and smiled at nothing, my stomach twisting into knots. Sarah's fingers brushed mine as she slipped the phone from my pocket, staring at the text for just a beat before sliding it back. She whispered, Bathroom break. Now actual. I followed her lead, excusing us with a fake laugh as she guided me back inside. We moved down the hall, past a line of relatives waiting for the restroom, and straight out the side door into the night air. The cool breeze hit my face, but it didn't wash off the tension crawling up my spine. Sarah didn't say a word until we reached the hatchback parked at the end of the driveway. She hit the key fob, unlocked the doors, and ushered me in. The moment both doors shut, she hit the lock button again and leaned across to grab my seatbelt. Her movements were quick, sharp, not casual at all. Something's wrong, she said flatly. The way she said it wasn't dramatic. It was like a battlefield report. No emotion, just fact. You mean besides the cameras and Grandpa looking drugged out of his mind? She looked at me dead serious. They know we're here. They're watching us specifically. That text wasn't random. Whoever sent it had eyes on your phone. I swallowed hard. You think? Mom? I think this isn't just a birthday party. Your old lady's running something bigger. Those wires under the porch? Surveillance or power for a system? The guys by the fence? Not guess. Security. And your grandfather? He's not just sick. He's being managed. Managed? The word made my stomach flip. I gripped the seatbelt. So what do? Leave? Call the cops? Sarah shook her head. Not yet. Cops won't come for my mother-in-law's birthday. Feels weird. We need evidence, proof of what's happening in that house. I leaned back against the headrest, breathing shallow. You think they'd hurt him? Sarah's jaw tightened. If he's standing in the way of whatever deal your mom's cooking? Yes. The bluntness hit me like a punch. She didn't sugarcoat, and I needed that. I rubbed my hands together, cold despite the warm night. So, we go back in? She nodded once. We act normal, blend in, but keep your eyes sharp. If we find something we can document, photos, recordings, we take it. Until then, don't react no matter what. I closed my eyes for a second, gathering the steel I'd learned in uniform. She was right. This wasn't deployment, but the rules weren't all that different. Stay calm, assess, adapt. When I opened my eyes, I said, all right, let's play along. She squeezed my hand. That's my guy. We sat in silence for a few beats, the locked car like a temporary safe zone. I could see the glow of the house in the distance, laughter and music spilling into the night. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. Sarah finally leaned forward, pulling a small black case from under her seat. She flipped it open just enough for me to see a compact camera, a digital recorder, and a thin flashlight. Always come prepared. I raised an eyebrow. For a birthday party? For life, she said, tucking it back into place. I couldn't even argue. She started the engine, letting it idle for a moment, then shut it off again. We can't be gone too long. Let's head back before they notice. I nodded, steadying my breath. We stepped out of the car, shutting the doors quietly. As we walked back up the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on us. The night felt too still, too watchful. Inside, the party was in full swing again. Eleanor was holding a champagne flute, retelling the same damn story for the third time. Rachel was circling like a hawk, checking on guests, flashing her rehearsed smile. Nobody looked twice at us, slipping back into the crowd. That was almost worse. It meant they expected us to fall in line. Sarah slid her hand to the small of my back, her subtle way of reminding me to stay calm. I forced myself to laugh at a joke I didn't hear, to sip from a glass of water I didn't want. Then my eyes landed on Grandpa again. He was still in his chair, head tilted, lips moving slightly. Nobody else noticed. I walked over, kneeling beside him. "Grandpa," I whispered. "It's me." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Don't let them." His voice was barely audible. I squeezed his hand gently. "I'm here." Rachel's voice cut in behind me. "Alex, let him rest." I turned, my smile tight. "He's fine." Rachel tilted her head, studying me for a long second. "You always did worry too much." Before I could respond, Sarah appeared, clapping a cousin on the back like they were old friends. Her eyes flicked to me once, then away, a silent reminder. "Keep cool." I straightened and smoothed Grandpa's shawl, then stepped aside. My skin prickled as Rachel lingered just a beat too long before walking away. Sarah joined me by the buffet table. Under her breath, she muttered, "We need to get upstairs." "Bedrooms? Office? Anywhere your mom keeps documents now?" I asked. She nodded. "Best chances while everyone's distracted out here." I glanced around. The guests were caught up in Eleanor's latest story. Rachel was fussing with the caterer. The business partners were clustered near the patio, low voices mixing with the sound of laughter. It was now or never. Sarah tapped her glass against mine like a toast, then started toward the staircase casually. I followed, heart pounding, forcing my body to move like nothing was wrong. As we climbed, I glanced back once. Eleanor was watching us, her smile still in place, but her eyes locked on mine. I turned away quickly, my pulse thundering in my ears. The carpet muffled our steps as we reached the landing. My hand brushed the polished banister, the same one I used to slide down as a kid when Mom wasn't looking. Now touching it felt like grabbing a rail on enemy ground. Sarah scanned the hallway, her head tilting just slightly. Left, right, door frames, shadows. That combat calm of hers never looked out of place to strangers, but I could read it clear as day. She was in recon mode. 2 doors left, 1 right, she murmured. Office is probably at the end. I nodded, but my chest felt heavy. The wallpaper was still the same outdated floral Grandpa had picked decades ago, but everything else screamed of Rachel's control. Framed photos of her smiling at ribbon cuttings, newspaper clippings about Eleanor's business success. Not a single photo of me anywhere. I paused at one frame, an old shot of Dad holding me at a county fair. My hair was in pigtails, his grin wide. For a split second, I remembered what it was like before the lies, before Rachel became her shadow, before Grandpa started to fade into the background. Sarah touched my elbow. "Stay sharp." I blinked and pulled away from the memory. This wasn't the time. We reached the last door. Sarah tested the knob. It turned easily. Too easily. She pushed it open just enough to peek inside. A dark office, curtains drawn, the faint glow of a monitor still on. She slipped in first, motioning me to follow. The air was colder here, the hum of electronics filling the silence. Bookshelves lined the walls. Every title aligned like they'd never been read. The desk was spotless except for a locked drawer and a stack of folders. Sarah moved fast, pulling out her compact camera, snapping quiet shots of everything, the folders, the monitor screen, even the empty coffee cup with Eleanor's initials on it. I hovered near the window, peeking through a gap in the curtains. From here, I could see the men at the fence line. One lit a cigarette, his face briefly illuminated. "Definitely not family," Sarah whispered. "Drawers locked? Want to guess what's inside?" Contracts, maybe. Or meds, I muttered. She slipped a thin tool from her pocket, one of those things she claimed she didn't own but somehow always had. Within seconds, the lock clicked. Inside were more papers, neatly stacked. I leaned in as she flipped through them. Legal documents, all stamped and notarized. At the top of one page, Declaration of Incapacity. My throat went dry. That's Grandpa's name. Sarah's face hardened. She's trying to take control of his estate. This isn't just about business. She wants everything in his name while he's still alive. The edges of the paper crumpled under my grip. He's not incapacitated. He's drugged. That's why his meds are gone. Sarah slid the papers into place, relocking the drawer as quickly as she'd opened it. We have proof. Photos are enough for now. Don't take anything or they'll know. I nodded, forcing myself to breathe. My pulse was hammering too loud in my ears. Then the floor creaked outside the door. We froze. A shadow passed under the crack. Whoever it was stood there for 3 long seconds, then moved on. Sarah exhaled slowly. We're burning daylight. Let's get out before we push our luck. I followed him back into the hallway, every nerve buzzing. We moved like nothing had happened. Casual pace, heads tilted toward each other like we were just talking. Halfway down the stairs, I whispered, "This feels like a mission briefing." She smirked faintly. Because it is. Step 1, recon. Step 2, evidence. Step 3, extraction. You skipped the part where we don't die at my mom's birthday party, I muttered. Her smirk widened just slightly. That's covered under step 3. We reached the bottom as laughter rose again from the living room. Eleanor was still center stage, drink in hand, Rachel at her side. Nothing about their smiles had changed, but now I could see the sharp edges under the surface. I drifted toward Grandpa's chair again, kneeling beside him, his eyes cracked open, cloudy but fighting to focus. I took his hand gently. "It's okay, Grandpa. I see what's happening." His lips parted, a whisper escaping. "She thinks I'm gone." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. "You're not gone, I promise." Sarah's voice brushed my ear. "We need to decide our next move. Do we confront or collect more?" I squeezed Grandpa's frail hand. "If we confront, she'll bury this. If we wait, he could get worse." Sarah glanced at the chandelier, the lens catching the light. "We're already on camera. They know we've seen something." I straightened, forcing calm into my voice. "Then we blend harder. We go back in like nothing happened." She nodded once, but her eyes were sharp. She didn't like it, but she trusted me to call it. The party noise swelled again, glasses clinking, people laughing too loud. I stood shoulder to shoulder with Sarah, smiling on the outside while the inside of me twisted into knots. For the first time all night, I wasn't just the soldier or the grandson. I was the son of the woman orchestrating all of this. And that fact cut deeper than anything else. Sarah's hand stayed warm against the small of my back as we drifted deeper into the crowd again. My face ached from the fake smiling, but I kept it on, scanning every detail like my life depended on it. By Grandpa's chair, a man was already kneeling. He wasn't family. I'd never seen him at any holiday, any reunion, not once. His suit was too crisp, his leather bag tucked neatly at his side. He pressed 2 fingers to Grandpa's wrist like it was routine. Eleanor's voice carried across the room. "Everyone, this is Dr. Calvin Brooks, the man keeping my father comfortable these days." The crowd gave polite nods. A couple muttered greetings. Just like that, everyone accepted him. Everyone but me. Grandpa's eyes flickered, weak but aware. I stepped closer, crouching beside the man. "What exactly are you giving him?" I asked, my tone sharper than I meant. He looked up at me calmly, practiced smile in place. "Just making sure he stays relaxed. At his age, stress can be dangerous." "That's not an answer," I shot back. Eleanor's laugh cut through before Brooks could respond. "Alex, let the doctor work. He knows what he's doing." I forced my jaw to unclench. Funny, I thought his primary physician was still Dr. Monroe. Or did that change without telling the family? For the first time, Brooks's smile twitched. "Transitions happen. Your mother felt a specialist in geriatric care would be more suitable." Sarah appeared at my shoulder, glass in hand, looking every bit the casual doctor on leave. Specialist in keeping people quiet, huh? Her tone was light, but the weight in her eyes wasn't. Brooks straightened, closing his bag with deliberate calm. He's in fragile health. My role is to ensure he remains stable. Stable, the same word people used for patients in comas. Grandpa's frail fingers clutched mine suddenly, his nails barely scratching my palm. I leaned down, his whisper ragged. Don't trust. I smoothed his blanket, forcing my face to relax while my insides twisted. He's cold, I said loudly, for anyone watching. I'll take him upstairs for a sweater. Eleanor immediately shook her head. No need. The doctor will handle it. I looked right at her, my smile tight. He's my grandfather. I can handle it. There was a pause for a moment. Her eyes sharpened like glass, but then she chuckled, raising her glass again as if I were just the stubborn son. Of course, always independent. Sarah leaned closer as we stepped away. We can't get him upstairs without them following. Too risky. She was right, but the fire in my chest didn't care. Grandpa's weak warning still echoed in. Sarah whispered, That bag, did you see the label? I shook my head. Brooks is carrying controlled meds, stuff I've seen used overseas for sedation, not over the counter, not standard care. My grip tightened on the serving spoon. So, they're drugging him deliberately? She didn't answer, which told me enough. Across the room, Brooks set his bag on a side table, flipping through paperwork. From my angle, I caught sight of a bold header stamped across one page. Medical evaluation, patient Arthur Whitfield. I felt ice slide down my spine. The same name, the same intent as the documents in Mom's drawer. Sarah, I breathed. She followed my gaze, her jaw tightening. Yeah, same playbook. We moved in sync, drifting closer like casual guests, curious about the hors d'oeuvres. I leaned down as if to grab a napkin, angling my phone camera just enough to snap a quick shot of the page. Flash off. Silent mode. One clean click. Brooks noticed. His eyes flicked to me, then to Sarah for a heartbeat. It felt like the room froze. Then Rachel's voice broke through. "Doctor, Mom wants you for a toast." Brooks shut the folder smoothly, tucking it away, and walked off without a word. But his glance back at me was sharp. Warning. I stood, adjusting my dress, pretending nothing happened. My pulse was racing so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Sarah sipped her drink, whispering behind the rim. "We've got him rattled." "That, or we just painted targets on our backs," I muttered. Either way, the air had shifted. The party noise felt louder, faker, like every laugh was forced. I could see it now. This wasn't a birthday party. It was a cover, a staged performance to keep up appearances while the real work happened in the shadows. Eleanor clinked her glass again, launching into yet another toast about family and legacy. Her words washed over me like static. All I could think about was Grandpa's hand clutching mine, his frail voice begging me not to trust. I kept my smile plastered on, nodding when people looked my way. Inside, my gut told me the truth. This house wasn't safe. This night wasn't normal. And every second we stayed, the noose was pulling tighter. I excused myself toward the hallway, Sarah trailing just a step behind. Both of us moving like we belonged everywhere. The living room chatter blurred into background noise as the walls closed in, quieter around us. Upstairs again, the office door still sat closed, but Sarah didn't even glance at it this time. Instead, she headed toward the smaller guest room across the hall. "Check here," she murmured. I pushed the door open. Neat bedspread, fresh flowers on the dresser, too perfect to be natural. But on the nightstand sat a small tray, 2 unmarked amber pill bottles, no labels, no prescriptions. My gut twisted. Well, that's not over the counter. Sarah picked one up, rolling it in her palm. Capsules, no imprint code. Could be anything. Sedative, antipsychotic, even experimental. I snapped a picture with my phone, then set the bottle back exactly as it was. My fingers shook, not from fear, but rage. They're drugging him like he's a test subject. Sarah scanned the room, then crouched near the dresser. She slid the bottom drawer out just enough to reveal a thin folder tucked beneath the lining. She pulled it free, flipping it open fast. Inside were contracts stamped, signed, notarized. Pages transferring property, stock, and accounts from Arthur Whitfield to Eleanor Whitfield. The effective date, tonight. My chest felt hollow. He hasn't even signed these. Sarah tapped a line at the bottom. Forged signature. Sloppy but legal enough to fool a bank if no one pushes. I pressed my hand to my forehead, fury boiling. So that's the game. Kill him off on paper before he's even gone. She took photos of each page, working with military efficiency. My job was lookout. I kept my ear to the hallway, listening for any shift in footsteps. Every creak sounded like an alarm. Then I heard heels, sharp, deliberate, coming closer. "Rachel?" I hissed. Sarah shoved the folder back under the lining, slid the drawer in, and straightened like nothing had happened. She gave me a nod and a smile. Act normal. I tugged the bedspread as if I'd been adjusting it, plastering on the smile just as the door cracked open. Rachel leaned in, eyebrows arched. "Everything all right in here?" "Of course," I said lightly. "Just needed a breather. The music's a little much." Her gaze flicked from me to Sarah, then down to the nightstand. My stomach clenched. Did she notice the bottles had been touched? Sarah broke the tension with a grin. "You decorated this room? It has your touch written all over it. Looks like a magazine spread." Her expression softened just a hair. Well, someone has to keep the place presentable. "Mission accomplished," Sarah said smoothly. She studied us for a beat too long before nodding. "All right then. Come back down when you're ready. Mom wants to cut the cake." As her heels clicked away, I let out the breath I'd been holding. My knees felt like water. Sarah whispered, "Too close." I shot her a look. She suspects. She pocketed the last photo she'd taken. "Doesn't matter. We've got enough proof to choke a lawyer." "Not yet, we don't," I muttered, glancing back at the pill bottles. "We need the actual meds tested. Otherwise, they'll say it's vitamins." Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. One sample, quick grab. If it's missing, they'll know. Not if they think Grandpa dropped one earlier, she said, pulling a tissue from her pocket. She shook out a single capsule into it, folded it, and slid it into her wallet. Insurance? She added quietly. I couldn't argue. We slipped back into the hallway, faces calm, posture easy, but my chest burned with adrenaline. One wrong step and Rachel would rip through the mask we'd built. Downstairs, voices called out cheerfully as Eleanor clapped her hands for attention. The cake was wheeled out, candles glowing. Everyone cheered like they were in a commercial. Grandpa sat slumped in his chair, eyes half closed. Rachel leaned close, guiding his hands toward the knife. The room filled with applause, but all I could see were the forged papers upstairs, the drugs in that bottle, the doctor's shadowed smile. Sarah caught my gaze and gave the tiniest nod. The mission wasn't done, and every second we stood there pretending to celebrate felt like tightening the rope around Grandpa's neck. The candles flickered as everyone shouted, "Make a wish." Eleanor guided Grandpa's frail hand over the knife, her smile too wide, too staged. Rachel clapped like a game show host, pulling the crowd in tighter. I forced myself to clap too, but my stomach turned. Sarah stood. We sat like that, eyes trained on the house, waiting for the sound of sirens. Every second stretched longer than the last. Inside, the shadows shifted. I swore I saw Rachel glance toward the driveway, her smile faltering for just a moment. My stomach dropped. They know, I muttered. Sarah's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Let them suspect. We've got leverage now. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. Just 3 words. You made a mistake. I showed it to Sarah, my skin crawling. She frowned, jaw set like stone. They've got someone watching now. I locked the phone and shoved it in my pocket, bile rising in my throat. Sarah leaned back, voice steady, even as tension bled through. Doesn't matter. We stay put. Cops are coming. I clung to her certainty, even as fear gnawed at my chest. My own mother had turned into something I barely recognized, and Rachel was her willing accomplice. But tonight, finally, someone outside these walls was going to see the truth. And once the truth stepped through that door, there'd be no going back. Red and blue lights finally washed across the driveway, the rotating beams cutting through the windows of my mother's perfect house. Relief hit me in a wave so sharp I almost cried. 2 squad cars rolled up, quiet but unmistakable. The music inside the house still played. Muffled laughter still drifted out like nothing was happening. Sarah squeezed my hand once before opening her door. Time to move, she said. We stepped out together, walking toward the flashing lights. The first officer out of the car looked barely older than me when I'd first enlisted. His posture said textbook professional, but his eyes said annoyed. We got called out here for a family squabble. Evening, he said flatly. We got a call about elder abuse, Sarah straightened, her tone clipped. Yes, Dr. Sarah Reynolds. This is Alex Whitfield. The victim is Arthur Whitfield. He's being sedated without medical necessity and coerced into signing fraudulent documents by Eleanor and Rachel Whitfield. The young officer blinked, unimpressed. That's a serious claim. It's a serious crime, I snapped before I could stop myself. Another voice cut in from behind the cruiser. All right, let's not eat each other alive before we get the lay of the land. A man in plain clothes stepped forward, badge clipped to his belt. Late 40s, salt and pepper hair, the kind of calm walk that said he'd seen too many scenes just like this. Detective Rains, he introduced himself, extending a hand. Sarah shook it firmly. I didn't. Rains gave me a look like he clocked that detail, but didn't comment. Instead, he said, So why don't you tell me why I had to drag 2 uniforms out here on a Saturday night? Sarah passed him her phone, screen glowing with the photos. Forged documents, unmarked pills. We have 1 capsule in possession. Victim is currently inside, visibly sedated. Rains scrolled through the photos slowly, expression unreadable. Then he looked up at me. You find these? How exactly? I lifted my chin. Because I grew up in that house. Because I know my mother. And because my grandfather told me not to trust them. The younger cop muttered. Grandpa drama. Figures. I spun on him so fast his smirk faltered. Drama doesn't put unmarked drugs in an old man's system. Drama doesn't forge his name on legal contracts. That's called a felony. Rains held up a hand. Calm, but firm. Easy. We're not here to dismiss you, but I need facts, not feelings. Can you get me the capsule? Sarah produced the tissue from her wallet, unfolding it carefully. Rains crouched, peering at it under the cruiser's headlights. He nodded once at the uniform officer. Bag it. Evidence. The officer grumbled, but obeyed, slipping on gloves. Rains straightened. All right, here's what's going to happen. We go inside, we see the scene, we talk to the alleged victim. If what you say holds water, this doesn't stay a family issue. It becomes mine. My pulse hammered. And if he's too drugged to speak, Rains's eyes met mine evenly. Then the evidence speaks for him. That's why you called us, right? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to nod. The front door opened just then, spilling warm light down the steps. Eleanor appeared, smiling like a politician. Officers, what a surprise. Everything all right? My fists curled at my sides. Rains didn't smile back. Evening, Miss Whitfield. Mind if we come in? Eleanor's eyes flicked past him to me and Sarah, then back to the detective. The pause was a fraction too long before she said, Of course. Come in, please. We all stepped inside together. The music quieted. Guests turned, murmuring at the sight of uniforms. Rachel appeared at Eleanor's side instantly, all wide-eyed innocence. What's going on? She asked sweetly. Rains didn't waste time. We're here on a report of possible elder abuse. We'll need to speak with Arthur Whitfield privately. Gasps rippled through the room. Eleanor chuckled lightly, shaking her head. This is absurd. My son has issues. He's been gone a long time, comes back and thinks he knows better than the people who've been caring for his grandfather. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. Caring? You call drugging him care? Rachel's smile cracked just enough to show teeth. Rains cut the tension with a hand. Let's keep the temperature down. Where is Arthur? Eleanor hesitated, then gestured toward the sitting room. He's resting. Long day. You know how it is at his age. Rains nodded once to his officers. With me. They moved as a group toward the sitting room. Eleanor and Rachel trailed behind, protesting with every step. Sarah touched my arm, urging me to breathe, but I couldn't. My lungs felt trapped in my chest. When we entered, Grandpa was slumped in his chair, eyes half-lidded, hands twitching faintly. The half-eaten slice of cake on his plate sat untouched. Rains crouched in front of him, voice gentle but firm. Mr. Whitfield, my name's Detective Rains. Can you hear me? His lips moved, dry and cracked. A whisper barely formed. Help! The sound shot through me like a bullet. Eleanor rushed forward. He's tired. He doesn't know what he's saying. But Rains raised a hand, stopping her cold. Ma'am, one more step and you'll be waiting outside. The young officer scribbled notes furiously. The other hovered by the doorway, keeping Rachel from inching closer. Rains leaned in again. Mr. Whitfield, can you tell me if anyone's been giving you medicine? His eyes rolled sluggishly, his lips trembling. Pills? No, you don't want them. Or no, you haven't, Rains asked carefully. His hand jerked weakly, swiping at the table like he wanted something gone. That was enough. Rains stood, turning on Eleanor and Rachel. Until I know otherwise, you're both separated from him. Officers, keep them here. Eleanor's smile finally broke, rage flickering across her face before she smoothed it back down. Detective, you're making a mistake. Rains met her stare evenly. If I am, I'll own it. But right now, looks like you're the one with explaining to do. Rains straightened, his hand brushing the notebook closed. His voice was calm, but the kind of calm that carried teeth. Officers, keep Miss Whitfield and Miss Whitfield here. No one leaves this house. Eleanor's jaw clenched. Rachel sputtered, her sugary voice breaking. You can't just barge in and treat us like criminals. Rains didn't look at her. Ma'am, sit down before I decide obstruction looks good on you. The party atmosphere drained out of the room like someone had cut the power. Guests shifted uncomfortably, whispers spreading. Nobody touched their cake anymore. Sarah moved closer to me, her hands steady at my back. Breathe, she whispered. I did, barely. Rains crouched again, softer now. Mr. Whitfield, do you want medical attention? Grandpa's lips moved. Yes. That was all it took. Rains nodded to an officer. Radio for EMS now. Eleanor exploded. This is harassment. He's fine. Look at him. He's just old. Rains turned slowly, pinning her with a stare. You want to keep talking, or you want to wait for your lawyer? Eleanor shut her mouth, but her face burned red. Paramedics arrived within minutes, rolling in a stretcher. The guests parted like water, staring with wide eyes as the medics lifted Grandpa carefully, checking his vitals, attaching monitors. One muttered something about sedation levels that made my stomach twist. I followed a few steps, desperate to keep him in sight, but Rains stopped me gently with a hand. They'll take care of him. Right now, I need you here. I nodded, my throat thick. The paramedics wheeled him out, past the glittering decorations and untouched food, past the guests who couldn't even meet her eyes. The sound of the stretcher wheels on hardwood was the loudest thing in the house. When the front door shut behind them, silence fell. Rains turned to Eleanor. Let's have a chat in private. Eleanor barked out a laugh, bitter. You think you can corner me in my own home? Detective, you're out of line. Rains' voice stayed even. Maybe. Let's find out. He gestured toward Eleanor's study. Reluctantly, Eleanor moved. Rachel glued to her side. Officers trailed them. Sarah and I followed close enough to hear, far enough not to interfere. The study was everything I remembered. Dark wood, leather chairs, the faint smell of cigar smoke. Eleanor stood behind her desk like it was a shield. Rains didn't sit. He walked slowly around the room, his eyes scanning the bookshelves, the framed certificates. The drawer left just barely ajar. You've got a nice setup here, he said casually. Mind if I look around? Eleanor bristled. Yes, I mind. You don't have a warrant. Rains shrugged. Fair, but I've got probable cause. And if I call the judge right now with what I've seen and heard tonight, how fast do you think that warrant shows up? For the first time, Eleanor faltered. Rachel jumped in, her voice sharp. This is insane. Alex is manipulating you. He hates us. He's always hated us. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. If I hated you, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't care. But Grandpa deserves better than whatever game you two are running. Rains held up a hand. Alex, let me. And then he turned back to Eleanor. Here's your chance. You can cooperate, or you can fight me and make this a lot uglier. The room pulsed with silence. Eleanor's hand flexed against the desk, her mask cracking at the edges. For once, she didn't have a polished answer ready. Rains nodded like that was all he needed to see. He motioned to the officers. Secure the room. Nobody touches a thing until forensics gets here. The officers moved quickly, gloves on, photographing the desk, pulling open drawers. One pulled out a stack of papers thick with signatures. Another found pill bottles tucked behind books, labels peeled off. My chest tightened. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Eleanor finally snapped, her voice booming. You have no idea what you're doing. Those are private family documents. Rains cut her off, his voice steel. Those are exhibits now. Rachel reached for the stack, but an officer blocked her. Ma'am, step back. Her composure cracked, eyes flashing. He'll ruin us, she shrieked, pointing at me. That ungrateful brat, he doesn't deserve a dime. Rains didn't blink. Not anymore, he doesn't. The air was electric, charged with years of buried resentment and fresh fear. Eleanor looked at me, not as a mother, but as a cornered animal. You think you've won something here? She hissed. I held her stare, my voice low but steady. I think Grandpa finally has someone on his side. The words landed like a gavel. Behind us, the uniform officer muttered into his radio, requesting additional units. Another bagged the pills carefully. The house that had once been Eleanor's fortress was turning into a crime scene before her eyes. And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother lose control. Her hand shook as she gripped the edge of the desk, her face pale under the warm glow of the lamp. Sarah shifted closer to me, her voice calm in my ear. She's unraveling. She was right. Eleanor's empire of charm and intimidation was crumbling piece by piece under the weight of truth, and the cracks were only getting wider. The scratch of gloves against paper filled the study as officers bagged document after document. The room smelled faintly of latex and dust, sterile in a house that had once thrived on showmanship. An officer approached Rains with a clear plastic bag. Inside it, a small black device with wires protruding. Hidden recorder found behind the bookshelf. Rains's eyebrows lifted just slightly. He turned the bag over in his hands, then looked at Eleanor. Care to explain why you're bugging your own house? Eleanor sneered. Security. Everyone does it these days. Rains's tone stayed flat. Yeah, then why is it tucked behind law books instead of mounted where someone might actually notice it? Eleanor didn't answer. Another officer pulled a shoebox from the closet, flipping the lid open. Inside, more unmarked bottles, each with different colored capsules, some half empty, some full. My stomach lurched. How many drugs did you have lined up for him? Rachel broke, her voice shrill. They were vitamins, supplements. Old people need them. Rains shot her a look that could cut glass. Then why remove the labels? Why hide them? She froze, her mouth working soundlessly. It was all crashing down. For once, my mother had no quick charm, no smooth spin, just sweat beating at her temple as the empire she'd built on lies turned to ash around her. Sarah slipped her arm lightly around my shoulders, studying me. I hadn't realized how hard I was shaking. The crackle of a radio broke through the tense silence. Unit EMS reports patient Arthur Whitfield regaining alertness en route, requesting update from family. Rains clicked his receiver. Copy. I'll have the family representative meet them. He looked at me. That's you, not her. He jerked his chin at Eleanor. Eleanor erupted. He's not family. He's an intruder, stirring trouble, jealous of everything we've built. I stepped forward, my voice slicing through her rage. I'm the only one who's been listening to him. That makes me family tonight. For a moment, even Eleanor had no reply. Rains nodded to an officer. Escort Alex to EMS. Keep him clear. Sarah insisted on coming with me, and Rains didn't argue. We followed the officer outside into the cool night air. The ambulance sat at the curb, back doors open. Inside, Grandpa lay propped up slightly, oxygen mask over his face, his eyes brighter than I'd seen in years. Grandpa, I whispered, climbing inside. His gaze found mine. It wasn't foggy anymore. It wasn't lost. It was sharp. Alex, he rasped, voice weak but steady. I gripped his hand, tears stinging hot. I'm here. You're safe. He looked past me at Sarah, then the officer. They've been drugging me, making me sign things. I told them no. I said no. The officer scribbled every word down. Sarah nodded grimly. I leaned close, my voice soft. Do you understand what you just said? His eyes narrowed with indignation. The same look he used to give me when I tried to sneak cookies before dinner. Of course I do. I'm not senile, Alex. I never was. A sob caught in my throat. He had been in there all along. We're just buried under chemicals my mother forced into his veins. The paramedic gently adjusted him. He's stabilizing. Toxicology will tell us what's been in his system, but levels are coming down already. Rains appeared at the ambulance doors, his expression grim but satisfied. Mr. Whitfield, do you want to make a formal statement? Grandpa's hand squeezed mine, fragile but fierce. Yes. His voice carried enough strength that even the paramedics stilled. Rains gave a small nod. We'll get that on record. He turned to the officer at his side. Cuff her. From inside the house, the sound of scuffling broke out. Shouts echoed. Eleanor's voice rose, livid. You can't do this to me. I built this family. I own this house. The officer at the door answered coldly. You don't own him. Moments later, Eleanor stumbled into view, wrists shackled behind her, her face twisted in fury. Rachel trailed behind, screaming at anyone who would listen, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Neighbors had spilled onto their porches now, watching as the once unshakable Eleanor Whitfield was led to a squad car in handcuffs. The woman who had ruled every room she entered now looked small, pathetic against the flashing lights. Grandpa watched from the ambulance, his breathing steadier. "Good," he whispered. Eleanor caught my eyes, thrashing like a person drowning. "You think he loves you, Alex? You think this makes you the hero? You just killed this family." I met her gaze, my voice level. "No, Mom, you did that yourself." They shoved her into the back of the cruiser, the door slamming shut with finality. Rachel was restrained next, her shrieks piercing until the door muffled them. The silence afterward was deafening. Rains pulled out his notepad, but this time his voice was softer. "Alex, you did the right thing tonight. Hardest calls are usually the right ones." I nodded numbly, gripping Grandpa's hand. Sarah stood solid beside me, her arm brushing mine. "It's over," she murmured. But as I looked at my mother's house, no, her crime scene, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. The papers, the pills, the hidden recorders, they were just the beginning. Still, for the first time in a long time, the truth wasn't buried. It was standing in the open, glaring under the harsh light of police flashers. And Eleanor Whitfield had nowhere left to hide. The cruiser door slammed shut, but Eleanor's voice still carried, muffled rage spilling through the window glass. Her shouts bled into the night, desperate, manic. The words twisted until they were almost unrecognizable. Sarah kept one steady hand at my back. "Don't let her pull you in. She's finished." I nodded, but something in me still burned. Years of fear, of silence, of swallowing words just to keep the peace. I couldn't let it end with her spewing poison through a squad car window. Not without facing her myself. I looked at Rains. "Can I speak to her? Just once." The detective studied me for a beat, then nodded. "A minute, and I'll be right there." The officer by the car opened the rear door, holding Eleanor in place. Her wrists were still cuffed, her shoulders tense with fury. But when she saw me step forward, her expression shifted. The rage didn't vanish. It calcified into something sharper, colder. "Well," she sneered, "the prodigal son finally grows a spine." I folded my arms, forcing my voice to stay even. "No, Mom, I just stopped mistaking fear for respect." Her laugh was hollow, scraping. "You think these people care about you, about him? They'll cut deals, bury evidence, move on to the next case. But me? I built everything you're standing in front of." I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "You built it on lies, on hurting the very person who gave you life, and you thought no one would ever stand up to you." She leaned forward, her voice low, venom dripping. "You're weak. Always were. That degree your wife wears doesn't make you stronger. Without me, you're nothing." The words might have cut once, but not anymore. I tilted my head. "Funny, because without me, you'd still be free tonight." For a second, the mask cracked. Her jaw twitched, eyes narrowing with recognition. She knew it was true. Before she could spit another word, Rains tapped the door. "That's enough." The officer shut it firmly, locking the fury back inside. Eleanor's face pressed against the glass, still snarling, but the sound no longer reached me. I exhaled slowly, my chest unclenching. For the first time in years, I'd spoken without fear of her hand, her voice, her shadow. Rachel wasn't faring any better. She stood on the curb, cuffed, mascara running, her designer dress wrinkled and torn at the sleeve from struggling. She spotted me and spat out, "You'll regret this." She was right. "You don't know what you've started." Rains ignored her, signaling for the second cruiser to take her away. Then he turned to one of the uniformed officers. "Bring Dr. Brooks in for questioning. He's been circling this family all night. Let's see what role he played in this circus." The name twisted my stomach. Calvin Brooks, the family doctor who had been so conveniently present, so eager to reassure everyone that Arthur was declining naturally. Within minutes, another squad pulled up, escorting Brooks from the side patio where he'd been cornered by officers. His white coat was gone, sleeves rolled up, his smile too wide, too strained. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted, hands raised. "I only prescribed what Eleanor told me Arthur needed. That's all." Raines's jaw tightened. "That's not how medicine works, Doc. Save it for the interview room." Brooks was shoved into the back of a car, his protests muffled as the door slammed shut. The circus was unraveling fast, but my focus was pulled back to the ambulance, where Grandpa's frail hand still rested in mine. His eyes were wet, but his grip was steady. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. I leaned closer. "Never. I was late, but I'm here now." A tear slipped down his cheek and his voice cracked. "She used to be such a sweet girl. I don't know when she turned cruel." I squeezed his hand tighter. "That's not on you. You raised her with love. She chose power instead." He nodded faintly, the weight of it all pulling his shoulders down. "I just wanted peace in this house, not this." I pressed my forehead to his gently. "Peace comes after truth, and tonight the truth finally caught her." Sarah climbed into the ambulance beside me, resting a hand on Grandpa's shoulder. Her voice was steady, grounded. "Sir, the hardest battles aren't fought overseas. They're fought in families. But you've got your grandson now. You're not alone anymore." Grandpa smiled faintly, eyes fluttering. "Thank you." Raines reappeared, flipping his notebook closed with finality. "They'll be booked tonight. Charges are stacking up. Fraud, elder abuse, unlawful sedation, conspiracy. DA's office will have a field day." He paused, softer now. "Alex, he'll need you. Court hearings, statements, doctors. It won't be easy." I nodded, my hand still holding Grandpa's. "I know, but he finally has someone fighting for him. That's all that matters." Outside, Eleanor's cruiser pulled away, taillights glowing red against the dark street. Rachel's followed, her shrieks still faintly audible until the car turned the corner. Brooks was next, his smug mask cracking under the reality of handcuffs. One by one, the people who had tried to bury Grandpa's voice disappeared into the night, swallowed by flashing red and blue. The street grew quiet again. The neighbors drifted back into their homes, murmurs fading. The house that had once been Eleanor's pride now stood hollow, crime scene tape waiting to seal its doors. I looked at it one last time, the weight of memories pressing heavy, birthdays, holidays, that laughter that never quite reached the corners. And now, the night it all came crashing down. Sarah's arms slid around my waist. "Come on, let's get him to the hospital." I nodded, brushing a thumb across Grandpa's knuckles. "We're going, Grandpa. No more cages. No more poison." His eyes glistened, but his voice was clear. "Home. I just want to go home." For the first time, I believed we could give him that. The ambulance doors closed, sealing us inside. The siren wailed, pulling us forward into the night, not running from the past, but carrying the only part worth saving. The hospital room was quiet, except for the rhythmic beep of a monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen. Grandpa's bed was propped near the window where the early light spilled in, gentle and gold. He looked smaller than I remembered, but his eyes, sharp, steady, were his again. I sat beside him, coffee cooling in my hands, my body aching from days without real rest. Sarah stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, keeping watch the same way she did in combat zones. "You don't have to guard the door," I told her softly. She smirked. "Old habits. Besides, the nurses already trust me more than the security cameras." Grandpa chuckled faintly, his voice still thin, but stronger each day. "I like her. She doesn't flinch when I glare." Sarah grinned and gave a mock salute. "Sir, I've faced worse than your glare." For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. A real laugh, not the brittle kind I'd forced through years of dinners with Mom. The doctors came in and out with updates. Toxicology confirmed the drugs had been sedatives mixed to mimic dementia symptoms. The cocktail had been administered in small, steady doses for months, enough to dull, never to kill, at least not right away. Enough to control. It was horrifying, but also clarifying. Every moment when Grandpa had seemed confused, when his words had slurred, when he'd forgotten names, it hadn't been him at all. It had been them. I stayed at his side for days. Sarah arranged everything else: lawyers, phone calls, even meals. She told her hospital she was on personal leave, and they didn't argue. Medicine teaches loyalty, but family teaches responsibility. Grandpa's strength returned slowly. Each day his voice grew steadier, his humor sharper. He started telling the nurses stories about me as a kid, like the time I tried to dig a bunker in his garden after watching a war movie. Sarah loved that one a little too much. But when visiting hours ended, and it was just the two of us, his tone shifted. "You saw her in cuffs," he said one night, his voice quiet but cutting. "How did she look?" I hesitated. Angry, like she always did when someone told her no. His eyes searched mine. "And you? Did you feel strong?" I swallowed, my chest tightening. I felt free for the first time since I was a kid. I didn't flinch. He reached for my hand, his skin paper thin, but his grip firm. "That's worth everything. Don't lose it." The trial moved faster than I expected. With the evidence the police collected, pills, documents, recordings, there wasn't much for Eleanor's lawyers to twist. Rachel turned on her in her first interview, crying about being manipulated herself, but the DA wasn't sympathetic. Calvin Brooks lost his license before he even made bail. Eleanor tried everything: charm, rage, even threats. But the judge didn't care who she'd been in the community. She was sentenced for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. When the verdict was read, she stared at me, the same stare she'd used to keep me silent as a child. Only this time, it didn't land, because this time I stared back. After the sentencing, reporters swarmed, but I had nothing for them. This wasn't their story to chew up and spit out on the evening news. This was Grandpa's life, my life, our fight. Weeks turned to months. Grandpa moved into my house for a while, where Sarah set up rails and safety features, like she was preparing a forward operating base. He complained about the fuss, but every night he slept without drugs, without fear, and every morning he woke up remembering exactly who he was. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sun sink low, he turned to me with tears glistening. "I thought my voice was gone," he whispered. "But you gave it back." I squeezed his hand. "You never lost it. They just tried to drown it out." He smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. "And you? What about you? You've carried this sense of duty, this strength, but who carries you?" I looked at Sarah, leaning against the railing, sipping her coffee like she had all the time in the world. She caught my eye, raised her mug, and winked. I laughed softly. I think I found someone. Life didn't turn perfect. It never does. There were still court dates, still reporters who wanted sound bites, still whispers in town about the fall of Eleanor Whitfield. But none of it mattered when I looked at Grandpa, alive, present himself. Sarah and I started planning for the future again. The military had taught me discipline, strategy, survival. But this battle at home had taught me something else. That the hardest war you ever fight isn't against strangers on a battlefield. It's against betrayal in your own bloodline. And surviving that meant you could survive anything. One evening, Sarah asked, "Do you regret coming back for her birthday?" I thought about it. About the nerves, the lies, the rage in my mother's eyes. About the car ride where Sarah said, "Something's wrong." About the moment I finally chose truth over silence. I shook my head. No, because if I hadn't, Grandpa wouldn't be here, and I'd still be living under a shadow. Sarah nodded, satisfied. Then it was worth it. As the sky turned to dusk, Grandpa dozed in his chair, a blanket pulled over his lap. The world was quiet for once. No shouting, no manipulation, no chaos, just peace. I leaned against Sarah, letting the weight of the past fall away, piece by piece. This wasn't the ending I imagined. It wasn't neat. It wasn't wrapped in a bow, but it was real. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Looking back, I realized it was never just about my mom's birthday. It was about seeing clearly for the first time. The lies, the fear, the weight we carried without noticing how heavy it had become. My mom thought control was strength, but real strength was sitting beside my grandfather while he laughed again, knowing his words were his own. And for me, strength was finally refusing to stay silent. Families can break you in ways no enemy ever could, but they can also remind you why it's worth fighting at all. I didn't walk away from my past weaker. I walked into my family stronger. And if there's one thing I learned through it all, it's that sometimes the hardest battle is the one fought around your own kitchen table.